In the dusty alleys of Baiyin, lost in Gansu province, deep in the heart of China, beneath the shadows of ancient mountains whose peaks kissed the grey pre-winter sky, and under the veil of a mysterious Chinese winter, a darkness lurked. From 1988 to 2002, the city was plunged into a nightmare, caused by a serial killer whose crimes echoed throughout the country. He was nicknamed the Chinese Jack the Ripper, a name that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest. The story of Gao Chengyong, a man whose name became synonymous with terror, is a story of fear, silence, and ultimately long-awaited justice. Baiyin of those years was a city of workers, of factories whose chimneys belched smoke that veiled the sky. Life flowed here in a measured way, conforming to age-old traditions. Young women who left for work early in the morning and returned late in the evening were the foundation of this life. No one could have imagined that along these very streets, where they walked every day, a merciless predator was stalking. The first victim was discovered in May of 1988. A young woman, 23 years old, was found in her own home, shocking the quiet city. The murder was horrific, marked by chilling signs of sexual assault. And it was only the beginning of a bloody nightmare. The police were utterly baffled. The absence of any leads, outdated equipment, and lack of experience turned the investigation into a nearly impossible task. The town's residents lived in constant, all-consuming fear. Young women, trembling, were afraid to go outside alone, while their families and loved ones anxiously awaited their return home. Time marched on relentlessly, and the killings continued. Each new crime became more audacious and brutal. The victims, primarily young women, were often dressed in red, which gave the events an even more sinister tone. They were found in their own homes, not far from their places of work, and also in abandoned buildings. The criminal, a spectral figure, haunted the city, leaving behind only fear and despair before vanishing into the night. The police, struggling with all their might against this nightmare, worked day and night. But the results, alas, were disheartening. The absence of modern forensic methods and poor coordination between the various units significantly hampered the investigation. Examinations of crime scenes, countless interrogations and searches yielded no results. The case, like a thick fog, accumulated more and more riddles. There wasn't a single witness or a trace of evidence that could even slightly hint at the killer's identity. A grim, oppressive atmosphere hung over Baiyin. People whispered, sharing chilling rumors that made their blood run cold. The city, once vibrant and noisy, had become a place where fear was commonplace. Schools cancelled extracurricular activities to protect the children, and businesses revised their work schedules so that women could get home before dark. The families of the victims, having endured the initial shock and grief, soon faced an icy silence and indifference. In the conservative Chinese society of those years, victims of violence were often subjected to cruel stigmatization. Fear of condemnation, deep shame for what had happened, and relentless pressure from society. All of this, as if by an iron hand, compelled many to silence the tragedy that had unfolded. Despite desperate efforts, the crimes continued. In the year 2000, the 9th victim was found, and in 2001, the 10th. By that time, a real panic reigned in the city of Baiyin. People feared every rustle, every suspicious glance. Additional police forces were sent to the city, but this brought no relief. the killer remained elusive, like a phantom sowing death. The last crime was committed in 2002. This became a true turning point. After long years filled with fear and sorrow, hope of catching the killer seemed faint. The investigation was officially suspended. The case was closed, like a heavy book slamming shut forever. Baiyin began to slowly but surely forget the nightmare he had experienced, the night terrors, and the tormenting memories. But the criminal remained free, continuing to live an ordinary life. Perhaps he went to work every day, smiled at his colleagues, and in the evening returned home to a loving wife and children. No one could imagine that this man was a monster who had stolen the lives of so many innocent women, leaving behind only pain and devastation. Years passed, a long 10 years. In Baiyin, life gradually returned to its usual course, but the deep scars left by the serial killer did not heal, reminding him of the tragedy. Society tried to forget the past, the terrible events that had shaken the city, but the memory of the innocent victims continued to live in the hearts of their loved ones, reminding them of their irreparable loss. And it was only after a long 28 years, when almost no one believed justice would prevail, that it finally did. In 2016, thanks to the rapid advancement of DNA analysis, the case moved forward. The police meticulously conducted a genetic analysis, comparing DNA samples collected at crime scenes with an extensive local database. Then, an incredible twist occurred. As if a ray of light pierced through the darkness, the DNA from the crime scenes matched a sample taken from Gao Chengyong, a 52-year-old man at the time. His quiet life, his measured existence, seemed to have forever concealed his true face. Gao Chengyong was immediately arrested. The news of his arrest instantly stirred up all of China, like a tsunami sweeping through a settled world. Finally, the nightmare seemed to be over, and a heavy stone was lifted from the shoulders of thousands. But the shock of realizing who exactly the monster was immense and all-consuming. Gao Chengyong, who lived quietly in his modest home, was married, raised children, and led an ordinary life, never hinting at the darkness within. He worked in a small shop that sold medical supplies. No one, not even his closest loved ones, could have imagined the nightmare hidden behind the facade of this unassuming man. The investigation, which began after his arrest, revealed the horrifying details of his actions. Gao Chengyong confessed to the murder of 11 women, as well as the rape and subsequent dismemberment of their bodies. The motives for his cruel crimes remained shrouded in a mist, but psychologists working with him managed to establish that he experienced a perverted sexual arousal from inflicting pain and the act of murder itself. The trial of Gao Chengyong became the central event in Baiyin and the entire country, dividing people into before and after. Society, which had lived in fear and sorrow for many years, demanded unavoidable justice. The victims' families received the long-awaited opportunity to tell their stories, share their unbearable pain, and finally find some peace. In March of 2018, Gao Chengyong was sentenced to death. The sentence was immediately carried out that same year. The death of Gao Chengyong, that monster, brought an end to 14 years of terror, but alas, could not erase from memory the suffering of his victims and the grief of their loved ones. The case of the Chinese Jack the Ripper caused a wide public outcry, echoing across the entire country. It highlighted acute problems related to the effectiveness of law enforcement, underscored the importance of developing forensic technologies and the need for enhanced protection of the rights of crime victims. And even today, after many years, this blood-curdling story reminds us of how important it is to tirelessly fight for justice, not to give in to the face of all-consuming evil, and to always remember those whose lives were cut short by this monstrous crime. It whispers that even the most terrible secrets can be revealed, and that justice, even if not immediately, will surely triumph. But what remained behind the scenes of this nightmarish story? What questions still trouble minds, remaining unanswered? First of all, questions about the reasons that prompted Gao Chengyong to commit these unthinkable crimes haunt us. What drove him to such cruel murders? Did he suffer from some mental disorder, distorting his perception of the world? Or were his motives far deeper and more complex, hidden in the darkest corners of his soul? Further, the question of Gao Chengyong's possible accomplices arises. Were there those who knew about his atrocities but chose to remain silent? Undoubtedly, his crimes required careful preparation, hiding the evidence. Perhaps someone helped him with this, or maybe someone was involved but managed to escape punishment. Moreover, the question of society's role in shaping the conditions in which Gao Chengyong committed his terrible crimes remains open. What influence did social norms, a constricting, conservative way of life, and the absence of an effective system for protecting victims have on the course of these tragic events? And finally, the question of how this case resonated in the life of Baiyin and other Chinese cities remains unanswered. Has the attitude toward violence, toward women, toward those who suffered from crimes changed? Have people reconsidered their views, reflected on the value of human life after these terrible events? Were sufficient measures taken to increase safety, to ensure more coordinated work by law enforcement agencies? These questions, like echoes, resonate in our hearts, making us ponder the very nature of evil, the role of society in fighting it, and how important it is to value human life. The story of Gao Chengyong is a brutal reminder that darkness can hide in the most unexpected corners, and that the battle for justice is a never-ending process, requiring courage, constant vigilance, and compassion from us. Let us return to the key moments of this chilling story to fully feel its depth and tragedy. Imagine Baiyin in 1988. You are a young woman living in this small, but once peaceful, city. Every day you, as usual, rush to work, and in the evening you return home. Everything around seems to be going on as usual, but an invisible yet palpable anxiety is already in the air. Rumors about the first victim, hushed but relentless, had begun to spread through the streets. The first sparse articles started appearing in the local newspapers, and the police had already begun their investigation. But fear gripped the city like an icy shroud. No one knew what monster lurked in the shadows. Your friend had become one of the first victims of this creature. You lived next door, and you met almost every day. Now she was gone, and you realized that the world would never be the same. However, one must live on. Years passed, the murders continued, but the police remained powerless. Local residents were plunged into fear, afraid to leave their homes after sunset. Shops were closing more and more frequently, and evening entertainment vanished. A sinister silence fell upon the streets. You constantly looked over your shoulder when walking, flinching at every rustle At any sound that broke the deathly quiet, your heart raced and anxiety swelled in your chest. It seemed danger lurked at every turn, that someone unseen was watching you from the darkness. You learned of a new victim. It was a young woman who worked at the same factory as you. Despair gripped you in icy claws. Your heart pounded frantically, and the question, "Who is next?" incessantly swirled in your mind. You could hear the police methodically searching the surrounding houses, knocking on doors, questioning residents. You watch as people around you weep, their faces contorted with grief and fear. Each day, the atmosphere in the city thickens, darkness enveloping it more and more. In 2002, when the last apparent crime occurs, you nearly lose hope. It seems that darkness will consume everything. But even then, in these darkest of times, you can't imagine that the killer who has terrorized your city for so many years lives among you, an ordinary person, unremarkable in the crowd. And then, after 28 years, a miracle occurs. The police announce the arrest of Gao Chengyong. In that moment, a storm of emotions overwhelms you. Relief mingled with fury and bone-chilling horror. How could this have happened? How could this man have committed so many monstrous atrocities, leaving behind a trail of sorrow and suffering? Soon, I learned about his life, his family, and the work he did. The world around me seemed to have turned upside down, losing all logic. I went to the trial, wanting to see everything with my own eyes. In the courtroom, I saw the victims and their exhausted relatives, who finally had the opportunity to speak about the nightmare they had endured. Their words, full of pain and sorrow, pierced the heart, making me shudder with empathy. Gao Chengyong sat in the defendant's seat. His face seemed to express no emotions, his gaze empty and indifferent. After the sentence was announced, a wave of mixed feelings washed over me. Anger replaced my satisfaction at the justice that had been served, and a deep, aching sadness for those who could never return to their former lives. You understand that justice has prevailed, but the deep pain of loss will remain with you forever, like an indelible scar on the heart. That is how, step by step, the tragic story of Gao Chengyong unfolded, leaving behind a trail of fear and despair. This story is an echo of silence, a cry for justice, and a symbol of hope that flickers like a fragile flame, even in the darkest times. But let us not forget the victims, those whose lives were stolen by a cruel murderer. Their names should be etched in stone. Their stories should live on in our hearts, reminding us of the value of every single second. Through the lens of this story, we can see how important it is to cherish life, to be mindful of those around us, and to tirelessly fight for justice. Gazing into Gao Chengyong's darkened eyes, we see not only the abyss of his depravity, but also a reflection of our own society, with all its strengths and weaknesses, its merits and flaws. And perhaps it is through the understanding of this dark story, through experiencing this pain, that we will find the strength within ourselves to build a world where such a tragedy will never happen again. The story of the Chinese Jack the Ripper is not just a tale of a series of brutal crimes. It is a narrative of profound human tragedy, of the relentless struggle for justice, and of the unwavering power of hope that doesn't fade even in the darkest times. It is a reminder that nothing is forgotten, that the memory of the victims lives on, and that the truth, sooner or later, will always prevail. Imagine For 14 long years, the city was shrouded in a veil of fear. Young women, trembling with terror, were afraid to go outside, their hearts constantly gripped by icy tension. Their families, relatives, and loved ones lived in nightmarish anticipation of the worst, suffocating from agonizing uncertainty. But despite this all-consuming horror, the criminal, nicknamed the Chinese Jack the Ripper by the people, remained elusive. He hid in the shadows like a merciless phantom, continuing his bloody harvest, leaving behind only pain, suffering, and death. Only thanks to the incredible persistence of the investigators, relentlessly pursuing the investigation step by step, the rapid development of the newest technologies, and the long-awaited, albeit cruel, intervention of fate, did the truth finally come to light, revealing the face of the monster to the world. This story, full of drama and tragedy, reminds us of the importance of vigilance, the inevitable necessity of the relentless fight against crime, in whatever form it may appear, and that justice, however slowly, must always prevail, no matter how long and winding the road to it. When we remember Baiyin, its narrow streets, its inhabitants, not only houses and faces come to mind, but also echoes of the experienced horror. We must not forget the victims, those whose lives were cut short suddenly under the blow of a ruthless executioner. Each death is a tragedy, each name a reminder of the fragility of human existence. May this story serve as a harsh lesson for us, etched in the stone of memory. May she remind us how crucial it is to fight for truth and justice, even as darkness gathers around. That even in the darkest times, when hope seems extinguished, there always remains a small, flickering ember capable of igniting the flame of faith. And finally, we must never forget that even within the most terrible tales of crime, in a world full of pain and suffering, there will always be room for compassion and empathy, for a drop of warmth in the icy silence,